they sort of hand over their data, and they are comfortable with that, and they know that it comes at a price which they are happy to absorb.
Welcome to Compromising Positions. I'm Leanne Potter, cyber anthropologist and head of security operations for a major retailer.
And I'm Jeff Watkins, a cybersecurity enthusiast and CTO of a major tech consultancy. Together, we're the award-winning tech podcast that asks non-cybersecurity professionals what we in the industry can do to make their lives easier.
And help make our organisations more prepared to face ever-changing human-centric cyber threats.
The data landscape is changing faster than ever, and with it, security threats. So whose responsibility is it to make sure your data is safe? Is it the data team, or is it the cyber team? We tackle this question and more with Head of Data and Digital, Tim Hatton.
From leveraging AI to secure data, to the importance of real user testing, to also how Tim threat models his client's data capability. You won't want to skip this very important topic. But before we jump in, just 2 notes about this chat. I incorrectly recommend a book, and the book I recommend is called Helter Skelter, but actually I was thinking of a book called Wicked, but I've put this stuff in the show notes if you're interested.
We also talk about data mesh, and if you're not familiar with that term, it's a data management framework that decentralises data ownership and responsibility to the teams that use the data. The idea is to make data more accessible and available to business users by directly connecting data owners, data producers and data consumers.
So you can see why we thought this was an important topic to cover, because with this model comes a lot of trust in others in doing the right thing when it comes to data security. So you won't want to mesh it up if people are following this framework in your organisation.
We love this chat and we think you will do too. So sit back and enjoy our interview with Tim Hatton. Welcome to another episode of Compromising Positions. Today we have a very special guest for you, Tim Hatton. Tim's been working in digital since, well, before it was called digital. Over the course of his career, he's worked in data and digital transformation projects for some of the biggest companies in the world. He joined And Digital in 2016 and is currently the head of data. At And, he's worked on data and strategy projects for clients in industries including finance, travel, publishing, retail, as well as several government departments. Welcome, Tim. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so Tim Hatton, I'm the head of data in the go-to-market team at And Digital. Primarily what I'm looking after for And is making sure we've got the right skills and capabilities in the data space, and also that we can sell the services that we offer to our clients and talk about them in the right way.
Well, the way Jeff described you, it seemed like you've been doing this for absolutely decades, but you look the pillar of youth, Tim. So tell us, how did you get into this role?
Well, so first off, it's obviously good moisturiser that's kept me looking youthful.
I mean, this show, we do it all. We do the beauty tips, we do the cyber securities. You know, it's what it's about.
Exactly. There you go. Well, you know that you get those diagrams on LinkedIn. You know, someone always seems to post one about once a month, which is this is your typical career path, or what people think a career path is, and then you get the wiggly line with the this is actually what a career path looks like. I mean, my career sort of started off more on the wiggly side than on the straight side, but seems to have sort of straightened out over the last sort of 10, 15 years or so. Through a number of jobs that I've had, I have always worked in digital and sort of computer technology. And then around the early 2000s, I'd come out of setting up a couple of .com startups. You know, everyone had to get their .com startup bug out of the way. And although that didn't make me any money at all, it taught me a lot about sort of running businesses and the value of data in that side of things. And I actually started up my own business building websites for people. And as part of that, I started to get really interested in the analytics around how people were actually using websites, looking at, started off looking at just like the log files, but also through things like Google Analytics. This is really interesting, real like power in being able to understand how people find you. What are they actually doing when they get to the site? How are they actually using the site? What pages are they most interested in? All those sort of things. So that's really sort of where that appreciation of data and the value of data to organizations sort of kicked off, and then it's really sort of grown from there.
Yeah, it's interesting you entertain sort of the behavioral data elements. I think when a lot of people think of data, they still think about the kind of the functional data, like we've had a sign up, we've had an order, but more than ever, people are interested in the behavioral side of data.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, although for good reasons, the amount of data, or the data that you could get on how people were actually interacting with the website has decreased a bit over the years, with sort of privacy introductions and those sort of things. I mean, back when I first started using analytics, I could pretty much pinpoint an individual from any of the data that came through the website, and knew all about how they'd searched for the site, where they were, what the device they were using, all those sort of things, which ethically was the right thing to start to mask some of that information a bit. But yeah, being able to understand sort of even being able to aggregate data to be able to understand where people have problems with a website. What are the bits that they get stuck on? What are the bits that they have real sort of challenges with interacting with? Which maybe, as when people in the digital space and developers and people actually build these things, we tend to miss this stuff because it's second nature to us. It's stuff that comes naturally. We interact with websites and digital products day in, day out. And so actually, when you see your product released out into the wild, and then how people actually start to use it, and sometimes some of the unusual things or unusual journeys that they can take through a site, or the ways that they start moving through a site in order to get around a problem that they might be having with a certain feature or with a certain part of the customer journey. It's really really interesting, and tells you a lot about improving that customer experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was a dev and I was invited quite a lot we would build something, and then the user research team would say, hey, we've got a two-way mirror. Do you want to see actually how people are using this? So they'd give our customers an iPad, and they're like, okay, so navigate to this. And they're like, that's not how you navigate to that site. You need to click here. Why are you not clicking there? Why are you doing that? And honestly,
Why have you ignored that
always,
beautiful menu?
always it was always something that you would just totally assume, right, if I was doing this is how I would do it, and they would just not do it. So I think that's a really valid point that you raise there, is that assumptions about what a good user journey is, and not actually testing those assumptions prior to it going live. But the nice thing about, I guess, tech these days is that we can iterate quite fast. But yeah, it's quite nice to get a more polished product out the door straight away.
Well, it helps with with that sort of agile delivery mentality as well. So if you've got the right tracking in place so that you can collect that data, being able to put something out so that you can test it and get that feedback straight away, so that you can say, okay, we changed this button from blue to green and that hasn't had quite the effect that we thought it would, helps to reinforce that feedback loop back into the teams to say, okay, this didn't quite do what we thought it would do, or we released this and actually loads of people found it useful, or we've got loads of engagement with this piece of content that we put onto the website. Let's do more of that, or let's improve it, or let's do whatever we want to do in order to increase that user experience.
Well, you're just fresh back from a conference, aren't you? From a big conference.
Yep. Well, in fact, 2 or 3 big conferences. So we've been
Wow.
to a few over the last week or so. I think it's sort of conference season at the moment.
Mm.
Yeah, we was at the AWS Data and AI conference this week. That was really, really interesting, and particularly interesting to see some of the customer talks about how people are using AI, particularly generative AI, because a lot of generative AI obviously has been sort of the hot topic of the last 18 months or so, with everyone looking at it as, this is the thing which is going to solve all of our problems. And maybe the shine has come off that a bit, where actually being able to understand, well, what are those problems that we could solve with it, and how do we actually apply it to business problems? Actually being able to go to conferences and see people talking about, well, this is actually how we've used it. There was the CDO from Government Digital Service was there, whose name I have completely forgotten, and he was talking about a service that's now being offered in order to understand communications when they're sent into Department for Work and Pensions, to identify people at risk, very quickly, rather than having to go through the lengthy process of, the vast amount of letters and communication that come in order for people to sift through it and read it. Actually being able to understand what's going on and highlight it quickly, so that people can have the support that they need given to them really, really sort of early on in the process, much faster than they would have been able to previously. It's really, really interesting to see that sort of impact that it can have.
And so useful as well, because it kind of, now to go to a really old-fashioned example, so we're in Yorkshire, so I can use this example, but West Yorkshire, or West Riding as it was known back then, they got one of the police station got one of the first ever kind of computers in a police station, and they used it to try and track the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe. But because there was so much data, they just couldn't sift through it, and they actually pulled up his record quite a few times, but because there was just so much data, they couldn't kind of attribute, this is the guy we should really be interviewing because he's a wrong one. And I imagine like notes like that, even today, like social workers' notes and things like that, I imagine they're quite sprawling, and to have any kind of indication, like, what are the keywords here that I'm looking for after, months and months of this discussions with clients and end users and things like that. I can imagine that being so incredibly important.
That is a common challenge, and since time immemorial, people have been doing quite a lot of work of how do we structure our data, how do we do an information architecture, which is still important. But actually, now with things like generative AI, kind of you don't necessarily need to, I guess.
No,
can work with unstructured data.
Yeah, and also the sort of barriers to be able to interrogate that data are coming down as well. I mean, I was looking at Notebook LM, the Google service where you're able to sort of connect it to your own document store, so your Google Drive, or upload your PDFs that you want, and then ask it to summarize them, or even, and not wishing to sort of put fears into you, it can even create your own podcast from the PDF. Now,
We have tried that.
We have tried that this week, and it no bueno for us. But so don't worry, audience. If you like our dulcet Yorkshire tones and things like that, you've got us for a while longer yet. It just didn't quite gel.
Just wait until I plug voice cloning into it. I reckon that's the next step, and then you'll audience, you'll never know. If we don't have,
we won't tell you. Yeah,
you'll never know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's a good example of previously something like that would have being able to take unstructured data in the form of PDFs or documentation, something like that, to be able to say, okay, we want a system which allows us to ingest all of this data, store it somewhere, apply a natural language processing to it, and then an interface on top of it, which then allows us to ask questions of that. No, that's a fairly significant engineering challenge, and would have taken weeks for someone to put together, and actually probably for most organizations is a sort of prohibitively expensive or complex thing to be doing. Now, within a few minutes, I can throw a load of documents into Notebook LM, ask it to summarize them, and get a fairly decent summary out of the other end of it, with no coding or technical skills required on my part whatsoever. So it's a real sort of that friction and those barriers to entry are really starting to come down.
I bet there's loads of uses for that in things like security teams as well. We get yearly big threat intel reports, threat intel feeds. There's a whole swathe of information out there. But sometimes you just want the TLDR. Sometimes you want the distillation. Sometimes you want it boiled down, and it can be pretty time consuming otherwise to try to boil down 50, 100 PDFs or a load of different feeds.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
And the ability for it to be able to digest vast amounts of information, it's I think actually the example you're just giving then, Leanne, about the Yorkshire Ripper, it'd be really interesting to sort of apply these systems to maybe some of those older old cases like that to see how fast could it have, would modern technology actually improve the ability to sort of do that detection or make those inferences which are needed in order to be able to solve those kind of cases.
Yeah, because it was absolutely a classic case of totally unsorted data. So they had so many data points, like I think hundreds of thousands. It was all on punch cards. That's how old this computer was. Just a shout out to the book. It's called Helter Skelter. That's what the book's kind of based on. It's like a police procedural, so it really just goes into detail, literally about this computer. So for any kind of techies, it's actually it's not just all about the obviously very horrific crimes, but it's the technical side of it's really interesting. But yeah, totally unstructured data using punch cards and just no expertise to be able to kind of sort this stuff. So yeah, really interesting. I did have a question for you just coming back to the conferences. Now,
Hmm.
bear in mind, I know that you didn't organise any of these conferences, but out of curiosity, was there any security talks on?
Now, if there were, I should really have gone to them, shouldn't I? Because then I'd have been, I'd have been prepped
No.
for this,
We
this
are not the
discussion.
police on this channel. We are not on the
Yeah.
police on this channel. So, you do what you do.
Now, off the top of my head, I can't remember if there were or not. I'm sure there may well have
Hey,
been.
just
One of the
place
talks
the blame on AWS and say nope, AWS, they'll let the side down there. I would have gone. Should I say I would have gone if you would have put them on, conference people.
Exactly. I mean, there were. In my defence, there were multiple tracks with dozens of talks in each track going on each day. So I can't possibly cover all of them. But yeah.
The reason why I ask is because one thing I think that we don't do well enough in security is that we just go to security conferences, and I feel like it's all right to talk amongst ourselves about stuff, and it is good to learn from our peers about things, but I think I always get so much benefit of going to non-security conferences, and I just think sell me a non-security conference, Tim. What did you learn over those days that perhaps, even though it's not security related, I could have probably taken away as a security person and gone, actually, maybe I should start thinking about maybe that process more with my security hat on rather than anything else?
Well, I think a lot of it's actually around that, what I was just sort of talking about then, around the barriers coming down. And I think any time that we see things becoming easier for people to get access to, so when you start to open up data sets to people, when you start to open up tools, technology to people, I can't help feeling that security people start to get a bit nervous then when laymen in an organization get let loose on data sets, and without maybe the sort of considerations around, well, just because we can give people access to this, should we actually be giving them access to this, and what should we, is there anything, sort of any unintended consequences that we might be opening ourselves up to, where we say, oh yeah, that'll be fine, we'll just let one of these language models loose on all of our documentation, and then suddenly you find that people can start querying passwords, or start querying people's salaries or something like that out of the data set. So I think you're right. I think there's often something really interesting about seeing talks not on the core subject of the conference that you're at, on a sort of related theme. I went to a conference a few years ago around sort of operational data, and there was a talk there about agile methodologies, and it was real like, if you ever sort of done anything in Scrum or anything like that, it was really, really basic stuff. The audience loved it though. They thought, this was like cutting edge, revolutionary stuff as far as they were concerned. And so I think often we get a bit blinkered in our lane, in our silo, thinking about, well, surely this is blindingly obvious to everyone that cybersecurity is the thing which people need to be interested in. And actually, being able to open it up to a wider audience who maybe don't think about it 24/7 is often a really interesting eye opener for what people don't actually know, and what people don't understand, and where the value is that they can get from something like that.
Yeah, I think we do need more multidisciplinary representation. I think at every single type of conference. So I think it's a two-way street. Security being so insular, sometimes outside team members don't get that kind of insight, but also the other way around as well. They don't get an insight into what's going on in data, what's going on in product, what's going on in design, what's going on in AI.
Well, yeah, that's what I was just about to say. It's just like the expectation from cybersecurity teams is that you know a little bit about everything to do with tech, right? And how can you do that if you don't go to other tech conferences other than cyber conferences? I think learning how other businesses are using other use cases, because obviously, Tim, you'll go to that conference and you'll go, oh, that's a great idea. I might try and bring it back to my organization or to my clients. And I think it's actually a really good heads up for cybersecurity people to go to non-cybersecurity conferences to go, oh, people will probably be interested in using AI in this way. Okay, so how can I enable people to do that rather than them just coming to me blind? Because, hey, I'm Tim, I've come from a conference, I'm going to do this. Like, wait. Let me put some security controls in there for you. But if people, cybersecurity people start going to these conferences that are not cybersecurity conferences more, then they would have a bit more of a heads up about what people are going to ask for from them.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really interesting point. And also with your constant vigilance hat on, being able to look at what people are talking about and see where the challenges and the problems and the issues may come down the road with that kind of approach, or the kind of use cases that they're talking about. I think it's really important, as well as if you're focused on, well, we know that something's we can do something cool with data. Actually, being able to have someone say, well, that's great, but have you thought about the implication of X, Y, Z when you're doing that? But how do we put those guardrails in place so that you can do that sort of innovative stuff, but remain safe at the same time? That having the sandbox that you can play in, but don't expose yourself to the outside world.
The last part's the really important bit there. Is not just turn up to the party and drink everybody's beer and be the unpopular one. It's like provide a way forward, provide a collaborative way forward for innovation. So, when you're not busy being an international jet setter with all these conferences, can you just give a little bit of an insight into what the head of data does at a consultancy nowadays?
Yeah, so my role this year has been slightly different to what it was previously. So previously, I was the head of data practice. So I was looking after our consulting team that work in the sort of data strategy and more advisory services. And as an organisation, we build digital and data products for all manner of organisations. So we've got teams of engineers and analysts who work across the business. And then we have a consulting team who work alongside them. And they're really there to, often they're the first team who go into a client. So client may actually not have a specific use case or a specific thing that they want built, or a specific challenge they want solving. It may be something as ambiguous as, we know that we've got a lot of data. We know that that there's value in it. We don't really know how to get that value from the data. What is it we should be doing with it? How are we set up as an organization? How good are we at governing the data? How good are we at being able to analyze it? And so helping them to sort of work through what are those use cases that help to address the objectives that you've got as an organization, because all these organizations have got, there's things that they want to do, there's company goals, there's strategies that need to be delivered on, and for the most part they can all be supported or delivered through better use of data in some shape or form. Being able to help them with cost savings through analyzing data to spot where operational efficiencies can come, or generating more revenue, because if you understand your customers better, you can serve your customers better, and they're more likely to turn into repeat customers and keep coming back to you, those sort of things. So that's really where I was working sort of up to the start of this year. And then as we've started to grow out the work that we do, it's looking across all of the client projects that we work on in order to see, okay, what are the technologies that we should be working in? Where are where's the demand coming from clients? How do we make sure that our people are trained up and have got the right skills and have got the right capabilities in what is a fast moving and a market where new things are coming in regularly, and we need to be aware of what are the best things for us to be recommending, for us to be working with clients on, and then how do we talk about that with clients? Being able to explain, what the benefits are of these services that we offer.
Yeah, it is a very rapidly changing area, but also getting loads of importance. I mean, and of course, data is like, as they say, the new oil, but it's also the lifeblood of businesses. And I guess working with clients, because you've been in consultancy for some time now, I imagine at some point you've also had to work with the security teams with clients as well. And I guess could you just sort of tell us a little bit about some of that experience and what's been a challenge and what's been good?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we do with companies when we first start working with them, typically, is we do an assessment of their data capabilities across the whole of the organisation, and what we like to do is not just talk to the data team about this, because you'll get a very sort of skewed view of how great they are at doing data, but talk to all of the teams within an organisation. So we talk to the marketing team, talk to customer service, talk to the IT teams, talk to the cyber teams, and just find out what their viewpoints on it is, because that allows you to build up a real sort of holistic picture, often with challenges and opportunities that aren't seen by the data team themselves, because either people don't know how to talk about it, or they can't put it can't sort of express the challenge they've got, or they don't realise that it's a data challenge. With the cyber teams, I think what's always sort of been a nice way of working there is to sort of put ourselves into their shoes. So start to look at the overall challenge and opportunities that an organisation might have in data, but do that from the cyber team's point of view. So, what is it that they've been tasked with? What are their worries? What are the things that they want to make sure are important, or want people to know are important to them, and that will drive their way of thinking and their way of approaching these kind of tasks, rather than it being a sort of a computer says no situation, or almost like an adversarial relationship where the data team say, well, we would do this if the security team would let us open up this database, but they won't, and so we can't do it. Actually being able to work with both teams and say, well, what could we do there in order to be able to enable this kind of use case? What are the challenges that we've got in place there, and how can we work around them? So that's more that sort of collaborative approach. I don't think we've ever really had anywhere where the cyber team has completely got in the way of being able to get value from data, or being able to develop use cases. What we often have, particularly in sort of more immature organisations from a data point of view, is much tighter controls and much tighter regulation and security in place, simply because there's not the understanding within the rest of the organisation about some of the dangers about what happens if this data, if we do expose this data, or somebody does send this data out accidentally, or we do give access to this data to the wrong people. And so helping that sort of education, that literacy on both sides, talking with the cyber teams about, well, what is it that we are trying to achieve? What's that use case that we're trying to enable here, and then asking them, how would you approach this? What are the controls, or what are the changes to the ways of working that we've got at the moment, which might help us do this, might enable this, because there's value here. There's something that as an organisation we want to be able to do.
Oh, you sound like a cybersecurity team's dream, Tim. I'll be honest with you.
Well, I am. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Oh my God, it sounds all very lovely. But it does lead me on to another question, which is, whose responsibility is it to protect the data? Is it your responsibility as a data practitioner, or is it the cybersecurity team, or something else?
I think it depends on the organisation and the way that they are set up from a sort of an operating model point of view. So the trend in the data world over the last few years has been data mesh. So this idea about sort of federating governance and control out to teams, and what that relies on is a degree of maturity in those, and understanding in the teams that own the data and have the control of the data, to know what is their responsibility from a security point of view, from a variety of points of view, quality and governance and security and those sort of things. And although that is the freedom and the agility that provides an organisation is great, often it comes at such a high cost and a high level of maturity that's required by the organisation as a whole, that it's an ambition of somewhere that they want to get to, rather than the first step on that journey. And so where we often end up is with this sort of almost like a sort of hub and spoke model, where it's some of that responsibility is delegated to the teams themselves, but you would still have a central team who would be responsible for the governance, for the security, for quality, and all those sort of enabling functions that go alongside it, and provide that advice and controls and guardrails out to the teams themselves, so they know how to do things safely, but they don't have the responsibility of making sure that is the case all the time. So it's a slightly fudged answer to the question, but I think it's up to the organisation to understand where that responsibility lies. Where it's important, though, is there needs to be a clear definition of where that responsibility lies. And the problems come up where it's not clear. There's a gap in the understanding about who is responsible for this, or it's such a tight level of control that people start ignoring it and they start trying to work around it and not actually adhere to it because it gets in the way of what they are trying to do.
Yeah, workarounds. Workarounds are sort of one of the key, I guess, threats to any kind of cyber. If anything's too restrictive, then eventually, just to do your job, you have to work around, and then the spooky things start coming in. Probably makes it quite complex if you've got a data mesh approach to deal with things like people's privacy and people's right to people make a subject access request and people's right to be forgotten and things like that. I imagine it makes it a little bit more challenging.
Yeah, although if you know what data mesh should give you, though, is much more clarity on what data you've got and where it sits. I remember when GDPR first came, or in fact just before it was sort of coming in, but when it had been announced and people were preparing for it, I was working for a retailer, one of our clients, helping to sort of assess the impact that GDPR was going to have, and the amount of work that we had to do in order to track down all of the data sets that were sort of within the business, where they were, what systems they were held in, what might be in them, what the impact of something like the right to be forgotten, or the being able to get the data that a PII request might require was a huge exercise, because no one really had to think about that across an organization as a whole before. Where data mesh and that sort of data product led approach brings you to is because it's sort of based on an ethos of transparency and understanding about what data is available, where is it available, how is it catalogued, so that anyone can go, okay, I need a set of all of our customer data, and be able to go and search for that in the data catalog in order to be able to find where that data is. Actually, it brings that out into the sunlight, really, as to where all that data actually sits and where it's and who's responsible for it, which teams are actually responsible for that data. Now, that still puts the onus on those teams to actually manage that data properly and adhere to the regulations and those sort of things, but at least the first step in that challenge around actually knowing what data you've got, where it is, and how to get to it is solved to a certain extent by that kind of approach.
Yeah, I think one of the other interesting things that's been bubbling under for a while, and I know I think we've probably spoken about it before in passing, is the concept of self-sovereign data that's kind of getting some traction in things like the public sector. Have you had many? I mean, I guess could you explain self-sovereign data maybe for the listeners a little bit, because I imagine some will be completely new to the concept.
So owning your own data, we've seen this from Tim Berners-Lee has created this project called Solid. So this idea that you, rather than you sort of being beholden to Facebook, Twitter, whoever that might be, to hold and manage your personal data, actually you become the owner of your personal data, and then you decide who can have access to that by having your own can't remember what they call them, pods, I think, or something like that, which is
it's a pod.
sort of, your own sort of storage of your personal data, which you then say, okay, I am happy for this organization to have access to this data, rather than you giving your data to an organization and then hoping that they will look after it and be happy about
Hope reigns eternal.
that they will look after your data properly on your behalf, right up to the point where you see them spread across the front page of the paper because their systems have all been hacked, and then you have to worry about what's going there. I'd say it's one of those things which is a great concept, and it's definitely the way that we should be thinking about data from a personal point of view. But at the moment, we are in a world where we've sort of made that deal with the organizations that we've handed our data over to in exchange for whatever it might be that we've decided to exchange it for. To some degree or another, we've become comfortable with that kind of relationship. Will that change in the future? Potentially. I mean, it's one of those things which will either change because it's legislated, that there's a sort of push effect from governments or other bodies to say, well, actually, you as an organisation can't hold this kind of personal data. We're going to have to come up with a way that individuals can hold their own personal data. The complexities that are involved in that, I think, are fairly, almost overwhelming at the moment. But not insurmountable.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. Because when you sort of describing it, I have heard of it before, but when you were describing it, I was just like, it's on paper, it sounds brilliant. But I guess you'd have a lot of work, Tim, if all of a sudden all your clients said, "Oh, we have to adhere to this now." You'd have to the governance in place of that, and not even just the governance, the structure, that like the physical infrastructure to put that stuff in place. It brings me out a cold sweat, like how much work that would be to implement.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a complex idea that, in fact, going back to the conferences, the chief data officer from GDS was talking about. I think someone asked a question about a sort of a common identity service for individuals across government, because at the moment every government department has an individual record of you, which seems a vastly inefficient service. But he said actually it's also it's a legal requirement that they can't have a single source of an individual's data, that it would require such a change in the law around how data was managed on individuals across different departments, and how that data sharing might come into effect, that it's something which is, again, would be great, but there are these huge sort of obstacles in the way of it.
I was just gonna say it's been contraband to GDPR, wouldn't it? Because it'd be like, well, why does HMRC need to have the data about my medical records, for example, and things like that? Like, it wouldn't. The whole point of GDPR, that element where it's only have the data you need, it would be kind of in contradiction to that, wouldn't it? So it would be a big reform.
But I think if it was in some magical world possible to use interrupt solid pods, then actually one of the features it does have is it allows you to access like specific parts of a record. So it would be having the idea of a portable record for an individual. I think that is one of the cases where it possibly could work. It just makes aggregation really, really hard, though, I imagine, if you want to do any kind of group studies.
Yeah, I think it would be, everyone can see the advantage in it when you go, well, imagine if you move house, you only have to change your address once. And then all of your utility companies, all of your credit cards, all the bank everything, everyone gets updated all at the same time. And that sort of use case makes perfect sense, up until the point where you go, well, imagine if you've got something wrong in your record, you misspell your name, and suddenly you find yourself unable to access every single piece of information that you've got in your NHS record, in your bank, in your in everything. The centralized nature of a system like that is a strength and a weakness to it, in potentially causing problems down the line. Now there's things like blockchain and other ways of sort of managing the control of the changes in there, and making sure that it's there's always a permanent record about those changes, so that you can always roll them back. But it's an interesting but complex and challenging space to start to move into.
Can I play devil's advocate? Should we be giving people so much freedom over their data? Now, how I mean by that is, will people, if this ever did come to be, we've got all the infrastructure in place, we've got all the governance in place, self-sovereign data, do we trust people to make the right decisions about their data? Or are they just going to say, oh, it's easier just to let anyone have whatever they want?
I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that there's particularly generations that have grown up with that as almost like the default is, I will hand over my data in exchange for a service or something like that. I think those of us of a certain age still have a certain reluctance around that, or we need to see a very good value exchange in place, or we understand that there is the value exchange in place there for it. I think my children's generation are very comfortable with that, as that is the modus operandi for everything they do in the digital world. Is they sort of hand over their data, and they are comfortable with that, and they know that it comes at a price which they are happy to absorb.
They're calling that the new social contract. I think we discussed that in one of our talks, actually. The old social contract being, you give some of your freedoms and your ability to do certain things away to things like governments and to the church many moons ago, and to hospitals and to other organisations, in exchange for social order and to be kept safe and things. And now the new one is, the new social contract is, you will give bits of your data away, some of your privacy away, probably, in exchange for services, and sometimes in the past that's been abused. I mean, thinking about the Cambridge Analytica thing, it's been very badly abused. But and I think, yeah, the new generations are very permissive when it comes to this, because as you said, they grew up with it. It's the normal for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you're working with your clients, how do you define the parameters of privacy and security as a value add? Because obviously, in my world, my argument is I'm trying to give you value because, hey, long term keep you safe. But, I can only prove that if something did or didn't go wrong, which is really, really difficult. But I imagine you come across sort of the same challenges in your world, where you have a lot of responsibility around your client's data to kind of see that through to the end. But keeping data safe doesn't generate money. So how do you make that kind of discussion seem of value?
Yeah, it's a topic which has become more and more pertinent over the last few years, where the focus on value for money, on the return that you get from the investments that you're going to make in your data initiatives is really come to the fore. I think the previously, I mean, I don't want to, it's not like it was a sort of a blank checkbook that you had for doing this sort of stuff, but there was a sort of an understanding that data was worth investing in, that value would come from it at some point, that understanding what your customers were doing, understanding all of these things were worth investing in, and so were all of the things that went around that, the systems that you needed in place, the people that you needed, the technologies, etc. And I think as the market sort of matured and people started to look at, well, what are we actually getting for this investment? Where's the value in this coming from? It's very easy, or it's easier to be able to say, okay, if we're going to build a predictive analytics model for churn or something like that, and we believe it will reduce the number of people that churn in our customer base by 5%. So if you know roughly what your customers, what sort of average spend for your customers is, what that then costs you when you lose them, you can start to put pound value on that. And those sort of direct value use cases are the thing which gets a lot of the focus. And then the problem is then when you start to talk about a lot of those enabling initiatives that you need in order to be able to support those use cases, in and of themselves, they don't have direct pound value. So if you said, we need to invest in some new governance processes, we need to invest in a data cataloging tool, we need to, whatever it might be, it's difficult to say for those things as an individual discrete initiative, what is that return that you're going to get from it? So what we've tried to do, and where we've had success in actually being able to talk about these things in that pound value, in that sort of base level of this is how much this means to you, is to join up those enabling initiatives with the use cases to be able to say, well, we can deliver this model, but if we improve the data quality through a better data quality program, or cleaning up the data that's in our database at the moment, actually we'd be able to understand 20% more of our customer base. And so we've got a larger market, or a larger group of customers that we can connect to. Similarly, something like security processes, being able to say, well, if we were to lose this data, or if this data was to get out of the organization, how much would it cost us to replace it? Or what would this effectively be worth on the open market? What are the things that we wouldn't be able to do if we didn't have access to this? And that then allows you to say, this is the value then that we can attach to having better security controls, having better governance controls in place, because they enable, or they make sure that we can do all of these other things that do make money, that directly make money. But if these things didn't exist, we would make less money. And that's, it's almost has to come down sort of as base as that sometimes, which is, we can make some money, or we can make more money. Would you like to make some money, or would you like to make more money? And generally, CFOs we'd like to make more money.
Yeah.
As long as it doesn't cost us even more to make that more money.
Yeah, because a lot of things in life are a balance of risk versus the return on investment at the end of the day. It's just that balance is complex and multi-layered.
Yeah.
Just one, hopefully time for one final question. You said during our pre-call that you had an interesting approach to threat modeling, and that being sort of threat modeling through the user journey. Do you want to maybe just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of the ways that in fact when I came into data, all those years ago, looking at how people actually move through a website, or move through a checkout journey, or something like that. So the customer journey, how do they enter a site? How do they then interact with the pages? What is it they do around adding, if it's on a retail site, how do you add things to the cart, those sort of things. Being able to map that out to be able to see what are the touch points along that route that a customer has along their journey, and what's the data that we need to collect or that we are collecting on that customer as they go through those different points, and what are the systems that data gets stored into, so that we can see, well, where is that data? What is it we want to understand about the customer or the user and how they're interacting with those systems, and where does that data end up getting stored? Because sometimes it's not obvious which system something gets stored into, and actually you can find sometimes you've got almost a leaky bucket occasionally along that route, where a third party tool is being used at some point, or there's some your marketing team have introduced, not wishing to denigrate marketing teams, but your marketing team have introduced some third party piece of software which is collecting a load of data on how customers are interacting with a certain component on the website, and that's all being stored off site somewhere, and you didn't realize this, and suddenly all of your customer data is being actually squirted out to a third party somewhere that you've got no control over, and actually was implemented outside of any governance process. And so being able to do that kind of that end-to-end journey mapping to see what is it we are collecting along that journey, what's that data that we have are tracking on a user, both from the viewpoint of what is it we actually need to know, but also where is it going, where's that data actually being stored, what controls and security processes have we got in place around that, helps us to understand where those challenges and where those risks might be in protecting and managing that data.
Sounds like a plan. Sounds like something that people could really implement. I like that very much. Well, you have been a fantastic guest, Tim. If people want to reach out and get in touch, probably to pick your brains more about data, and maybe join you for a conference. I don't know. Maybe you need a conference buddy. How can they do so?
I am. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Twitter. My kids have tried to get me on TikTok and things like that, but let's leave it at the professional one. So on LinkedIn, Tim Hatton. So please, drop me a line and get in touch.
Awesome. Well,
Lovely.
thank you again so much for your time. It's been a wonderful discussion.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Data security isn't just a technical issue, it's a human one. It's about understanding how people interact with that data, how we can design systems that are both secure and user-friendly.
Yeah, data is a powerful tool, but also a delicate one. And it takes more than just one team to make sure it's used wisely and responsibly. But I think Tim has provided us with some excellent insights on how we can go about doing that. So who do you think is responsible for the data? Let us know in the comments if you're listening on YouTube, make a post on LinkedIn, or leave us a review. We'd love to know what the mood is in the community on this question.
We would. We hope you enjoyed this episode. See you next time. Keep secure and don't forget to ask yourself, am I the compromising position here?